Voss's Dex Carroway built the system, Mira Blain hid its trails, Tomlin Greaves silenced the threats, and Lena Voss vanished with millions. Together, they formed the UK's first crypto-led drug syndicate, a digital empire so invisible even law enforcement couldn't prove it existed, until one mistake cracked it all open. Dex Carroway had always stood out, but not in the way most prodigies do. At just 27, he had already ghosted the tech world once, leaving behind a promising cybersecurity start-up that had just secured a $4 million investment round. The press speculated on burnout or burnout recovery, but the truth was far darker. Dex had never been interested in the corporate ladder. He was interested in systems, how they could be built, broken, or entirely rebuilt outside the rules. While his peers chased tech awards and conference invites, Dex slipped underground and started crafting a system that would run parallel to the legal world. A system fueled not by money or fame, but by control. 6 months after disappearing, he resurfaced anonymously on the Darknet. Using the handle Keystone Phantom, he launched a hidden crypto platform called Lena Voss. At first glance, it appeared to be just another decentralized payment node. But buried within its source code was a series of enhancements, invisible routing paths, layered encryption that morphed every 10 minutes, and something far more dangerous: direct blockchain to street-level drug sales. It wasn't just a payment system. It was a marketplace without faces, warehouses, or physical touchpoints. Everything was synthetic. Every order fulfilled through a network of loyal ghost couriers who never spoke to their clients. In less than 4 months, Vault was processing over 200,000 worth of anonymous transactions every week. But Dex needed a partner to make it untraceable. That's when he contacted Mira Blain, a disgraced intelligence analyst. She had been dismissed from MI5 after suspicions of unauthorized data access. Though she denied leaking anything, she had knowledge that no civilian should ever possess. Details about camera blind spots, listening post limitations, and the inner workings of agency surveillance. She had disappeared off the grid too, which made her perfect. Together, Dex and Mira mapped out an invisible logistics chain. They used dormant Airbnb accounts to rent short-term drop-off points. Packages were disguised as urgent medical samples, pet supplies, or even school uniforms. They timed deliveries around major sporting events and city marathons, ensuring movement through areas packed with people and digital noise. Every shipment was rerouted 3 times before its final destination. Couriers wore no uniforms, drove rental vehicles under fake IDs, and used disposable phones that burned out after a single call. Mira oversaw all the routing. Dex maintained the back end of Vault. There was no leader, no face to blame, and no pattern to follow. Everything was done by algorithm and execution. By the time local authorities in Liverpool and Birmingham noticed a new wave of synthetic drugs, it was already too late. These weren't street pills cooked in someone's bathtub. They were pharmaceutical-grade substances, engineered to mimic designer highs without triggering standard narcotics field tests. Emergency rooms saw a sudden rise in overdoses that couldn't be explained by heroin or fentanyl. Victims were found with no track marks, no dealer contacts, and no clear source of supply. It felt like a ghost was flooding the streets. Behind the scenes, Dex was running his empire from a modified crypto mining facility in Leeds. The operation looked like any other data center. Walls lined with humming servers, rows of ventilation ducts, and a constant flow of low-frequency noise. But inside, Dex had installed a military-grade firewall system and enough computing power to mimic 5,000 users at once. The walls were reinforced with concrete, no windows, just screens, cables, and the sound of fans cooling his growing criminal syndicate. As money began to pile in, the platform expanded. Neon Vault's code was refined, made cleaner, faster, and smarter. Dex started offering subscription plans to other Darknet dealers. For a monthly fee paid in Ethereum, smaller groups could use his platform to move product and launder proceeds without ever knowing who ran the system. The UK had never seen anything like it. And still, not a single arrest had been made. There were no street busts, no informants, no traces of hand-to-hand deals. The drugs kept flowing, and the police had no clue where they came from. It was as if the entire operation existed inside a cloud, hidden from view but real enough to kill. The UK's first crypto-led drug syndicate had been born, not in alleyways or nightclubs, but behind passwords, proxies, and cold lines of code. Lena Voss wasn't a name anyone had heard, and that was by design. She didn't exist in government records, school registries, or biometric databases. No known birth certificate, no passport, no address. Yet, her Ethereum wallet became the final destination for nearly every transaction flowing through Neon Vault. She was the financial spine of the operation, the last stop before digital cash vanished into silence. Her alias on the blockchain was a Foreign Ghost, and that was the only name the Darknet community ever whispered. Lena's involvement began quietly. She had first appeared as a wallet consultant on crypto forums, helping cybercriminals launder coins using complex privacy tools and recursive smart contracts. What made her different wasn't just technical skill. It was her ability to strip identity from currency. By the time a coin passed through her hands, its origin couldn't even be traced by blockchain forensic software used by international agencies. She didn't run the drugs, move the product, or even speak to buyers. She just moved the money. And that made her more powerful than anyone else in the chain. Her connection to Dex was never proven, but her code showed his fingerprints. Every contract she used mirrored Neon Vault's signature, its compression rate, timing buffers, and ghost latency intervals. Together, they had crafted something close to digital alchemy. Mira Blain once described her as the invisible one who holds the lever, though no one had ever confirmed if the two women had met in person. Lena worked from a system of isolated satellite links and rotating IPs. Her signal bounced through compromised satellites, down to backdoor weather stations, through stolen university servers, and finally into cloud systems registered to fake nonprofits. Her digital vault had never been breached, not even once. She never stored logs, and every keystroke was routed through an AI decoy overlay that mimicked thousands of users performing mundane tasks. Watching cat videos, ordering groceries, browsing PDFs. In the background, however, Lena was laundering millions in digital currency each week. While Neon Vault expanded its operations, Lena's task became harder. Bigger transactions meant more scrutiny from international watchdogs. Agencies in the US, Germany, and South Korea had all flagged similar patterns of wallet activity. Brief Ethereum bursts hitting obscure addresses, followed by an immediate transfer into unlisted tokens and cold wallets. But by the time analysts traced the data trail, it had already collapsed behind them. The public still had no idea what was happening. On the surface, the UK economy saw a minor surge in small business registrations. Shops were opening under unusual names: pet cremation services, industrial chemical distributors, independent tutoring centers. All fake, all shells, each tied back to Neon Vault-funded wallets. Lena had created a circuit of fake legitimacy. She used shell companies to launder the funds into real estate and offshore holdings, then recycled that money back into the Syndicate as business loans. Detectives working on Operation Amberfold were baffled. They had digital breadcrumbs, but they all ended in firewalls or dead ends. The money had no faces attached. The transactions were legal on paper. No drugs were being bought or sold in traditional terms. It was digital sleight of hand, and Lena was the magician behind the curtain. But there was one slip. A low-level IT contractor working with the NCA discovered a cached DNS request tied to a server used in one of Lena's laundering loops. It was a microscopic crack in the armor. The request originated from a weather station in Northern Ireland, one believed to be offline for years. Investigators rushed to the location, but found nothing but decaying infrastructure and old computers stripped of hard drives. Still, it proved something crucial: Lena was real, and she had once been there. For the first time, authorities felt the Syndicate could bleed. Yet, while the NCA scrambled to follow this thin thread, Lena was already miles ahead. She burned the weather station from her command system and activated her final protocol. A digital suicide script that wiped every trace of her infrastructure within minutes. Logs were shredded, wallets self-destructed, and routes collapsed into oblivion. In less than an hour, her presence on the web vanished entirely. To the outside world, Lena Voss never existed. But to those inside the criminal web of Neon Vault, she remained a legend, a faceless enigma who could erase fortune, identity, and truth with a keystroke. And her silence was more dangerous than any voice. Tomlin Greaves had a reputation long before he became part of Neon Vault. A former black market arms trafficker, his name had surfaced in European intelligence circles following a string of disappearances in Rotterdam linked to botched gun deals. Though no charges ever stuck, those who crossed him rarely got a second chance. Greaves moved like a ghost through border towns, using forged documents, burner phones, and prepaid rental cars. His past made him unpredictable, his presence terrifying. And that's precisely why Dex brought him into the Syndicate, where Dex engineered the system and Mira oversaw the network. Tomlin Greaves was responsible for control, brutal, physical, and final. He handled disruptions with precision. When a courier in Leicester began stealing product to sell on the side, Greaves handled it. When a chemist in Glasgow threatened to walk away after a batch of synthetic opioids caused 3 deaths, Greaves was the one who showed up at his doorstep. No threats were issued, no warnings delivered. By the time Greaves left, the message was already understood. He rarely left evidence. His signature was a black gas mask left behind at problem sites, a relic from his days running weapons through Eastern Europe. It became his calling card. The media speculated on whether it was symbolic, but in truth, it was practical. Greaves often worked in toxic environments, basements with chemical leaks, improvised labs, or crematoriums turned into pill-pressing facilities. The mask protected him while unsettling anyone who discovered it. As Neon Vault expanded its reach, so did Graves's workload. He began constructing fallback routes in case the digital chain was ever compromised. Using decommissioned petrol stations, abandoned service lots, and even repurposed car washes, he created temporary handoff points masked as legitimate businesses. These places became critical nodes in the physical distribution of high-demand substances, particularly a new lab-synthesized stimulant codenamed Helix 9. It had begun to flood club scenes in Manchester and Cardiff, promoted by influencers unaware of its source. Graves also managed loyalty within the Syndicate. Unlike Dex, who trusted algorithms and encryption, Graves believed in fear. He would conduct surprise inspections of micro labs, often unannounced and always heavily armed. One such inspection in a rented warehouse in Slough ended with 2 men missing and the entire operation relocated overnight. He never stayed in one place for more than a few hours and never returned to the same location twice. Despite his operational secrecy, one mistake put him directly on the radar of DCI Ronan Mallory, the lead investigator of Operation Amberfold. A failed shipment in Sheffield had left behind a rare clue, a scuffed gas mask caught on CCTV, worn by a tall man who adjusted it before disappearing into the crowd. Mallory enhanced the footage and began obsessively comparing the figure's gait and posture against known criminals. After weeks of analysis, the digital likeness pointed toward Tomlin Greaves, who had last been reported in Lyon 2 years earlier. Mallory dug deeper and found more troubling patterns. Burned-out service stations. Witnesses who remembered a man with surgical gloves. Clean crime scenes where product had been seized, but no one had been arrested. Graves, he realized, didn't just clean up after the Syndicate. He engineered the illusion that it didn't exist. His job wasn't just to kill or threaten. It was to erase, and he was good at it. Meanwhile, inside the Syndicate, rumors started to spread. Some believed Greaves had grown too independent, that he had begun moving product outside of Dex's knowledge, creating his own network in Scotland and northern France. Mira pushed Dex to investigate, but there was no concrete proof, just whispers and missing shipments. When one of Neon Vault's senior chemists disappeared along with £250,000 worth of product, Dex knew it wasn't a coincidence. And when Graves failed to respond to encrypted messages for over 72 hours, it set off alarms within the leadership. Mira suspected defection. Lena, ever silent, redirected multiple wallets out of the UK just in case. The Syndicate was beginning to fracture. Graves was either going rogue, or worse, preparing to burn it all down. As Operation Amberfold circled closer, it became clear that their most reliable enforcer might now be their greatest threat. And Ronan Mallory, driven by the image of that gas mask, would not rest until he uncovered the truth. The breakthrough didn't come from a high-level sting or an undercover agent. It came from a junior analyst named Hayden Brooke working out of a dim, lit back office in Cheltenham, tasked with scanning blockchain irregularities across Darknet markets. He stumbled on an anomaly. A small, publicly visible smart contract buried within a chain of anonymous wallets linked to suspected drug activity. It was coded differently. Unlike the rest of Neon Vault's iron-clad encryption, this one looked like an early prototype. A mistake. An echo of the Syndicate's first build. Hayden flagged it. At first, the file seemed like an abandoned relic. But as he unpacked the data, he discovered something far more explosive, a complete transactional record. A raw ledger that connected Ethereum addresses, timestamps, IP ghost nodes, and, in 2 cases, actual GPS coordinates embedded as test data. The ledger hadn't been meant for release. It looked like a developer's diagnostic log accidentally left accessible in a forgotten node. But it held everything: a map of Neon Vault's rise, its major players, and the veins through which its drug empire pulsed. Within hours, the file reached DCI Ronan Mallory. He had been chasing shadows for months, chasing whispers of a system with no physical face. The ledger changed everything. It named specific shell companies, 4 of which were registered under slightly altered identities of real people, including a deceased chemistry teacher in Essex and a retired carpenter in Wales. The funds moved through fake tutoring services, construction consultancies, and non-existent charities. But one name caught his eye more than any other: Noah Mallory. His younger brother, Noah, was a freelance software developer with a troubled history. A brief stint in prison for credit card fraud, followed by years of unstable freelance gigs and quiet resentment toward the world. The ledger showed his name only once, as the recipient of a transaction from one of Neon Vault's middle-tier wallets. Exactly 14,700, labeled as consulting services. The date matched a time when Noah had suddenly paid off old debts and posted cryptic messages about finally breaking through. In the crypto space, Ronan froze. He faced a choice: recuse himself and hand over the case, or bury the discovery and pursue the bigger targets. But obsession outweighed ethics. He chose the latter and kept Noah's connection hidden as he pushed forward with building a task force. The priority was no longer to disrupt Neon Vault. It was to dismantle it. Meanwhile, inside the Syndicate, chaos began to seep through the cracks. Mira Blain was the first to sense danger. The sudden drop in transaction volumes, the erratic delays in Lena's wallet movements, and Graves's complete disappearance all pointed to a system unraveling. She scrambled to destroy logs, wipe burner servers, and patch exit nodes Dex hadn't touched in months. Mira knew how the intelligence world worked. The presence of a real time ledger meant surveillance had already begun. Dex, on the other hand, became more paranoid. He cut off communications with Mira, retreated deeper into the network, and began rewriting the Neon Vault source code from scratch, obsessively purging every redundant line and replacing signature patterns with machine-generated decoys. He moved his operations from the Leeds server farm to a rural underground compound in Wales, a bunker originally built for nuclear fallout repurposed into a tech sanctuary. But Lena did something unexpected. Instead of disappearing, she created a delay. She paused all wallet transactions for 36 hours. No withdrawals, no movements, no laundering. It created panic within the Syndicate. Dealers couldn't pay suppliers. Middlemen began calling in favors. Dex demanded answers, but received nothing. When Lena finally resumed activity, half the wallets had been emptied. The money was gone, no trace. It was as if Lena had pulled the plug mid-operation and walked away with the heart of the Empire. The real betrayal wasn't Lena's silence. It was her foresight. She had anticipated a breach and, without informing anyone, activated her exit strategy. The encrypted system she had built now responded only to her digital signature. Dex was locked out of his own creation. Mira tried to recover access, but every attempt triggered a self-erasing protocol. What had been a seamless syndicate was now a splintered shell. The digital empire had begun eating itself from the inside. Neon Vault was still live, but dying. Its builders no longer trusted each other, and its greatest weapon, secrecy, was dissolving fast. All that remained was one final move, and the clock was ticking. Ronan had his eyes on the whole network. And in the shadows, Lena had vanished. Again, the final stage of Operation Amberfold was executed in silence. No press briefings. No visible buildup. Just a pre-dawn flurry of black vans, unmarked drones, and synchronized movement across 4 counties. Months of surveillance, cryptographic decoding, and internal risk debates had led to this one morning. The goal wasn't just to capture a few key players. It was to decapitate the entire structure of the UK's first crypto-led drug syndicate before it could reassemble or scatter into smaller, harder-to-catch fragments. In a remote part of Carmarthenshire, Wales, the first strike team breached the underground compound where Dex Carroway had relocated. What appeared above ground as a derelict sheep farm concealed a reinforced bunker built from Cold War-era materials. Inside, agents found rows of blinking servers, 5 3D printed pill presses, and an emaciated Dex seated in front of 6 monitors, tapping frantically at his keyboard. But the system was already dead. Lena Voss had changed every access route, every node, every cryptographic lock. Dex no longer had command over the empire he had created. He surrendered without resistance, staring blankly at the flashing red prompt that told him he was no longer recognized by Neon Vault. Simultaneously, a team in Belfast cornered Mira Blain inside a shipping container retrofitted into a mobile command center. The walls were lined with LED panels displaying shipment maps, server diagnostics, and rotating passphrases. Mira had been trying to dismantle every trace of her side of the operation. But there wasn't enough time. She was caught smashing hard drives with a pipe wrench, her hands bloodied from handling molten circuit boards. Investigators later uncovered dozens of backup drives buried beneath her floor panels, containing surveillance logs, movement data, and compromised law enforcement radio frequencies. Her arrest was quiet, but the implications were massive. Mira had inside knowledge of how to defeat systems, and she had applied it masterfully. In Newcastle, Tomlin Greaves didn't go quietly. Cornered in a public park just after midnight, he attempted to flee but was quickly subdued after a brief chase and an exchange of gunfire. He'd been using an abandoned greenhouse as a temporary safe house, where investigators found forged documents, weapons, burner phones, and evidence of at least 3 unresolved disappearances. His legendary control had ended with mud on his boots and 3 bullets lodged in a nearby fence post. He said nothing during transport. With Dex, Mira, and Greaves captured, the operation was declared a success. But behind the curtain, there was unease. The largest piece of the puzzle was missing: Lena Voss. Not a trace of her was found during the raids. Her wallets were empty. Her satellite routes had gone dark. Every known point of contact had been scrubbed clean. It was as if she had never existed. In the weeks that followed, Neon Vault collapsed. Without its handlers, the system began glitching. Transactions failed. Wallets froze. Users across the Darknet began reporting login errors and sudden lockouts. Then the platform disappeared entirely. No final message. No archive. Just gone. The Syndicate's users, thousands of them, vanished back into the shadows, leaving law enforcement with a database of scrambled usernames and ghost transactions. The UK street saw a dramatic decline in synthetic drug circulation within days. Emergency rooms reported fewer overdose cases. Regional dealers began to panic without their digital supplier. The nation took a breath of relief, believing the threat had passed. Then, just 90 days after the takedowns, a new encrypted forum surfaced on the Darknet. It was minimalistic, elegantly coded, and eerily familiar. It didn't sell drugs yet. It simply offered a secure, invite-only environment for decentralized logistics innovation. Its homepage featured one cryptic message: "The chain breaks only when the key is lost. I still have mine." The username that posted it was F. Oracle Returns. Behind closed doors, cyber analysts began whispering Lena Voss had survived. Not just survived. She had taken the playbook and was writing a second volume. What she built with Dex was just a prototype. Now, she was alone. Free from liabilities. Free from partnerships. Free from mistakes. The UK's first crypto-led drug syndicate had ended, but its legacy was already mutating. And somewhere, behind a wall of code and silence, the next chapter had already begun.